What is the difference between the anxious preoccupied attachment style and the dismissive avoidant attachment style? If you have been learning about attachment theory for a while, you might think this is a no-brainer, and it might be. There are a lot of differences. They kind of like on the other side of the spectrum. However, there are some similarities between those two attachments which might blow your mind. I know they blew my mind when I first learned about attachment theory, so stick around because I'm going to discuss that as well. My name is Patrycja Mochocka. For those of you who are new here, welcome. I'm a relationship coach and I specialize in attachment theory, and I have the Love and Thrive School where I run online courses and coaching that will help you to shift from surviving to thriving and have a life of love, safety and freedom that you desire. Without much ado, let's get into it. So let's start with the differences. So the differences are that the anxious preoccupied individual clings in relationships while the dismissive avoidant avoids and needs distance in relationships. When the anxious partner is stressed out, they want to co-regulate. That means they want to phone up a friend or preferably be close with somebody where they can calm down together, maybe talk about their problems. A lot of them are verbal processors. They want to chat, figure things out, talk about their emotions, and then they start to calm down when they have a love, closeness, connection. Meanwhile, the dismissive avoidant wants to process on their own. They feel safer to do it on their own. Okay, so the anxious preoccupied doesn't really feel safe. They don't have a lot of emotional regulation skills, and they feel unsafe to be left with a whole bunch of emotions. And they're like, oh, what do I do with this? I don't like being alone. This doesn't feel comfortable. I need somebody to help me work through this. The dismissive avoidant, on the other side, believes that it is unsafe for me to process things with others. They believe that vulnerability is a sign of weakness. And they have been taught that through the way they were brought up. Maybe nobody actually told them that, but perhaps they had quite a hard upbringing by parents who just said, oh, you know what, don't be such a baby, get over it, it's not a big deal. So just basically dismissed their emotions and needs. So they've developed that belief system that when I'm vulnerable and I show my emotions, I am going to get rejected or punished or ignored. It just doesn't feel good. So why would I want to put myself in that situation? Okay, so in an argument, the anxious partner is like, I want to resolve this, I want to do this now. And they become very emotional and they become the pursuer. Oh, they kind of are the pursuer in the relationship most of the time, right? They just approach the dismissive partner. While the dismissive partner is like, whoa, this is too much. This is just, all the alarm bells are on. I need to back up. So the anxious preoccupied individual tends to go into fight and flight mode in their nervous system when they are in conflict, when they don't feel safe. And the dismissive avoidant tends to go into freeze, shut down. And then the more the anxious preoccupied partner goes into fight and flight, the more the other party shuts down. And this is one of the trickiest things to resolve. However, it can be resolved. This is not a video about that, but I just want to let you know it can definitely be resolved. Now, let's talk about body language. So the anxious preoccupied person might be like very open towards you. Their chest, their face might be looking at you constantly and engaging with you. They might even touch you when they're talking to you, while the dismissive avoidant will want to keep their distance. So you will see that in their body language. If you lean towards them or if you step towards the dismissive avoidant, they might take a step back or they might lean back. And that will show you that they want that space. Meanwhile, the anxious preoccupied might do the opposite. When you step forward or lean forward towards the anxious preoccupied, they will maybe approach you and lean forward as that sign of, I want to connect with you. The anxious preoccupied partner or person might look at you and you will feel like you are ice cream. They just love the way you look. They will keep their eye on you because they're constantly reading you. They're trying to figure out what I'm saying, is how I'm connecting, working for you. How can I establish a better connection? They're reading your micro expression. They're quite hypervigilant. Meanwhile, the dismissive avoidant will need to look away a lot, or perhaps distract by looking at their phone. And so you will see more of a pattern of breaking eye contact and breaking that connection. Some dismissive avoidants even do this trick where they don't actually look people in their eye and they look people like on their forehead, on the nose, on the chin, because eye contact doesn't feel so good. It just feels so intimate and vulnerable for them. So the anxious partner, when they are talking to you, they will give you a lot of compliments. They will find out more about your relationships. Like, tell me about your mom and your dad, and do you have siblings? Tell me about your pets. And, so even when they ask about work, they will ask you about your emotional connection at work. Like, do you have a nice boss? How do you feel about it? Do you like your job? Meanwhile, the dismissive avoidant partner will more likely ask you things that are more logistical, more analytical. So they will not ask you very deep questions in conversations. They will like to keep the conversation surface level, talk about the weather. That's kind of like the emotional foreplay, they don't want to go deep. Perhaps they will talk about things like politics or the news or something like that. That is not really hugely emotionally evocative. Now, I know for some people, politics are very emotionally evocative. So just take it, situationally. Like, I think you know what I'm saying when it comes to that. They will not want to discuss relationships as much as the anxious, preoccupied person. Now, the pace of a relationship is completely different. The anxious person just wants to go all in. They just met you and they're like, this is my husband. You can already see the kids and the house and the future plans and holidays. Meanwhile, the dismissive avoidance is very slow to warm up. They will take their time. They will suss out the individual. They are very, very slow to warm up. Slower than the securely attached person. The securely attached person will be like a little bit vulnerable. They will share a little bit with you. They can engage on different levels. So the securely attached person will share a little bit about like relationships and emotions. They can also engage on more of an analytical level, and they can be balanced. Meanwhile, the anxious person will be more intense and emotional. The dismissive will be more analytical. And then when it comes to that pace of the relationship, anxious is going to be like, let's go for it. I like you. Let's spend our lives together. And they're very romantic, so they believe in like love at first sight and maybe even like twin flames or soulmates or things like that. Whereas the dismissive avoidant partner will be more distant, logical, and analytical. Because remember, like relationships never really felt good to them. They don't assign a huge value to relationships. So then you might ask, like, so why are they pursuing relationships? We are wired for connection. All of us, we are born with a system for connection. And the reason for that is, if you consider that a tiny little baby is just a mess. If you don't love that bundle of mess that is just crying, eating, pooping, keeping you up at night, if there is no connection, oxytocin and good feeling chemicals that are bonding you together, connecting you, you would not want to look after that child. You would just go like, oh, this doesn't feel good. It's putting me through a lot of stress. I'm going to distance myself from it. So then the human race wouldn't be able to survive. So connection, love, is actually a survival mechanism, okay? But for the dismissive avoidant, it didn't feel good for them, because when they tried to connect, when they were vulnerable, they had that break in connection. They had rejection or hostility in that place, or just ignorance, not ignorance, being ignored, absence. And sometimes absence of the things we need is an even bigger trauma than the things that we did receive that were like, say, a nasty word. Okay, maybe being criticized by a parent. Being criticized by somebody like the anxious preoccupied might have experienced is still energy. There is still a kind of connection. Absence of things is very confusing because when you don't receive something, when you look back at your past, you go, but my parents didn't fight, right? This is now I'm talking about the dismissive avoidant. And they often look back, or when they chat to me about their history, they're like, maybe my parents didn't fight, nobody was nasty, no, there was no domestic violence, there's nothing really obviously wrong. So what is wrong with me? Why do I feel so bad? And then they keep that secret, and it's very shameful to them because they're like, well, I didn't have any obvious trauma, I shouldn't be feeling like this. But they carry that shame within them. And this is like a very big surprise to most of the anxious, preoccupied, and fearful avoidants who listen to this, because the dismissive avoidants have this facade of being very cool, confident, composed. You will not realize that underneath all of that, they are very insecure and they carry a lot of shame. And sometimes that shame is so prevalent, it's almost like being a fish in water, where the fish doesn't even realize that it's in water, right? Like if you ask them, the fish, how is the water today? They will just be like, what do you mean? It's like if I ask you, how's the air today? It's like, oh, cool, hot. You know, it's like, what are you talking about? That's how some of the dismissive avoidants feel when they are just in that shame. They have to become aware of that toxic shame that they are in through their constant self-criticism that is playing around in their head. So that is that commonality. The first commonality that I have, the anxious preoccupied and the dismissive avoidance are both insecure. Okay, so you can think about the attachment styles as one being secure. The securely attached person is secure, and the other three are insecure. They are just insecure, all three of them. No matter how they present themselves, the coping tactics and facades and masks that they've learned to put on to show the world that they are not. Okay, so other facts, this is so interesting. At the core of it all, both the anxious preoccupied and the dismissive avoidant have an abandonment wound. Okay? The first time I heard it, I was like, what? The dismissive avoidant who always wants time away, all the space, they process by themselves, they like to be hyper independent, they are scared of rejection and abandonment. 100%, they are scared of abandonment. The only thing is that the way they cope with that fear is very different to the way that the anxious preoccupied learn to cope with their fear. The anxious preoccupied learned that in order for me not to be abandoned, I need to cling. So clearly, when they were growing up, something must have happened, and I'll just give you like an example out of my head, right? It could have been lots of things, but something might have happened like when their parents were not paying attention to them, and the child would perhaps injure themselves or throw a tantrum or cry or have a sore tummy or something, then the parents would show up and be there for the child. So then the child, through consistent affirmation of that type of behavior or a reaffirming of that behavior, by giving the child love and connection, when the child acted in those ways, in those clingy ways, the anxious preoccupied individual learned that in order for me to sustain love and avoid being abandoned, I need to cling. Meanwhile, the dismissive avoidant realized that when I cling, I get pushed away even further. And it's only safe for me to be distant, take care of myself, and then I know at least I can rely on myself. So those two big fears, abandonment fears, the abandonment fear is huge, you know. I know I just said these two, attachment styles have this one common fear, which is the abandonment wound. And it's huge because on a very primal level, we understand that if we are abandoned as infants, we will not make it in the world. So this is why it's such a big fear. And when it gets activated, it turns on our survival instincts, our defense mechanisms. And this is why I always say I teach people how to shift from surviving to thriving, because all insecure attachment styles, all three of them, are in survival mode. They are in their defense mechanisms, and we need to shift out of that because it's not good for your body, for your mind. You cannot grow. You will even get stuck in things like your business eventually if you are in survival. We need to then shift the actual physiology of the body to be in rest and digest, to be in social engagement, to know how to shift gears and be in that state of rest and relaxation where we can heal, where we can digest, where we can enjoy things like intimacy. All right, but I feel like I'm talking a lot about a lot of things. I hope you're enjoying it. Let me know. I kind of like it when people give me a little bit of context of things, so I hope you enjoy that as well. Okay, and then what else can we say about so that we on this topic of core wounds, and I'm going to finish off here. The abandonment core wound, or which is that big fear, joins those two. Insecurity, both of them are insecure. Doesn't matter how the dismissive avoidant looks. Then feeling not enough. Okay, this also blew my mind when I first learned about it. The dismissive avoidant feels not enough, and the anxious preoccupied also feels not enough. And often the dismissive avoidant will also feel inadequate, like I don't have what it takes to live life and have good relationships, which kind of fuels that not enough monster. Okay, how curious is that they are on this completely opposite side of the spectrum. However, at the root of it all, there is this common fear. However, we just learn to cope differently with those fears. So perhaps just remember that, right? That your partner is experiencing that same fear, because the anxious partner, when they look at the dismissive, they believe that the dismissive avoidant partner has all this power, and the anxious partner feels really inferior because they put the dismissive avoidant partner on a pedestal. And the anxious partner feels powerless in the relationship. And they look at this distancing and avoidance as a way of being superior. Meanwhile, it is the same fear that is driving the clinging and the avoidance. So there is this huge commonality. We cannot feel safe and do those behaviors. What I mean by that is when you are in fight, flight, it means that you feel unsafe. When you are in freeze mode, pulling away, isolating, you are feeling unsafe. Okay, so if you can remember that and think, you know what, when my partner does this, they feel unsafe. And this is how they cope with that feeling of feeling unsafe. And I need to make some allowance for that and understand that. And at the same time, this is what is coming up for me. And then together, we need to create a strategy to compromise and meet our needs. And this is also what I help couples do in couples therapy and coaching. So if you are interested in that, also go to my website. Remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this, so you can see more videos like this. And it would help me so much if you would share this video with somebody. This would help me to grow the channel and just help a lot of people, because I really want to get this information to as many people as possible, because it has changed my life and it is changing my clients' lives, and I just absolutely love it. I want to have a world where we all have love, safety, and freedom. Thank you for being here. Till I see you next time. Big love.